The power of mysterious alien technology is far beyond imagination. A scattered spaceship fragment can allow an ordinary person to pass through the barrier of the 14th floor and fall to his death in the hotel lobby. However, no traces of damage were left between the floors. What is even more alarming is that such powerful fragments are not the only one. They are scattered in every corner of the world like broken glass. A mysterious organization is acting secretly in an attempt to collect all the remains. Through them, it is changing the ecology of the Earth and manipulating human thoughts. The origin of everything dates back to 3 years ago. An alien spaceship accidentally crashed into the Earth. The hull shattered into countless debris. They scattered around the world with the impact force. Since then, various supernatural phenomena have begun to occur around the world. In order to find out the truth and contain these dangerous fragments, the FBI established a secret containment organization. It specializes in collecting and handling strange events related to the remains. However, the powerful power contained in the remains has also attracted the covetousness of those with ulterior motives. They secretly collect the fragments and push them into the black market, making their prices soar to sky-high levels. On this day, the federal organization received a tip. Someone is conducting a fragment transaction in a hotel. Finola and Brian immediately set off to investigate. However, they were detected by the other party as soon as they entered the hotel. During the chaotic escape, the seller hid the fragment in the cabinet in the corridor. Unexpectedly, this fragment was discovered by a waiter who came to clean. When the woman looked through it curiously, the fragment accidentally slipped from her hand, but instead of falling to the ground, it floated in mid-air. At the moment the woman reached out to touch it, her body seemed to be pulled by an invisible force, and teleported from the 14th floor to the first floor lobby in an instant. She fell heavily and died on the spot. The federal organization quickly sealed off the hotel. After testing by researchers, it was found that this iron piece has extremely strong radioactivity, which is highly consistent with the material properties of the alien spaceship wreckage. After professional frequency reduction processing, the iron piece finally fell back to the ground. Only then did the team members dare to carefully seal it. After handling the scene, Finola repeatedly watched the hotel's surveillance video in an attempt to figure out the properties of this fragment. But such an incredible phenomenon is beyond the scope of existing human research, making her overwhelmed. And at this time, supernatural events caused by these fragments are still occurring around the world. On the way home, a mother and son were driving. Something strange suddenly happened. Blood flowed from the mother's eyes. Without warning, she cried out to her son in panic. But the boy in the back seat had no reaction, and only focused on playing with the toy, until the mother stopped breathing. The boy then opened the car door with a blank expression, and dragged the mother's body out of the car. What is chilling is that, the body didn't fall to the ground but floated up and drifted in a fixed direction. When Finola and Brian arrived after receiving the report, the woman's body had already drifted 10 kilometers. It finally stopped after getting tangled in the farm's barbed wire. Brian made a preliminary judgment. The body might have come into contact with debris fragments, thus gaining the ability to float and being blown here by the wind. But after careful observation, Finola noticed something was wrong. The current wind direction was opposite to the direction from which the body had drifted. This wasn't being blown by the wind. It was more like something in the distance was silently attracting her. To get to the bottom of things, Brian tore off the barbed wire that was holding it. The woman began to drift in one direction. A few people quickly followed up, but it showed them an unforgettable scene. A tornado picked up by the ditch, and there was more than one body inside it. Later, they packed them up and took them back to the laboratory. After an autopsy by the forensic doctor, it was found that, although these people had no heartbeat, their cells were still functioning, and their brains were in a state of high activity. In this case, they might even be dreaming. But after examination, the forensic doctor said, their physical functions were constantly deteriorating. If they weren't woken up, they would die sooner or later. To find the source of the supernatural power, everyone began to investigate the woman's whereabouts. Finally, in the gas station surveillance, they found that there was a child with the woman. However, according to the data, the woman has been single to this day. This child isn't her child either. Fortunately, after multiple investigations, they found the boy's home address, so everyone called the child's family. Unfortunately, no one answered the phone. This made Brian begin to suspect that this family might well be the source, and had already developed the same symptoms, so the two hurried over to investigate. Sure enough, the house was empty. They also found the boy's figure in the photos in the house. Why would he get in a stranger's car? As the investigation deepened, Brian found the boy's mother behind the house. At this moment, she was also floating in midair like those bodies. Obviously, she was the first victim. Brian continued to go deeper, and found a huge piece of debris at the end of the backyard. The powerful force had already affected the surrounding space. Countless substances were floating in the air. He hurriedly took out equipment to test. The radiation here had seriously exceeded the standard. Such unprotected exposure to it could well turn one into unconscious people. He hurriedly retreated to inform the research team to come and recover it. Meanwhile, they contacted the boy's sister, hoping to find out the boy's whereabouts. However, the sister revealed an even more shocking piece of news. The boy had already passed away 7 months ago and couldn't possibly be alive. This surprised Finola and the other. It seemed that the boy wasn't the one who got the debris. To find out the situation, they found the sister to learn more. According to the sister's recollection, a few days ago, her mother also called to tell her that her younger brother had come back, but 2 days later, she changed her story and urged her not to come back. It was as if she had encountered something strange. At that time, she thought her mother was mentally unstable due to missing her son, so she didn't pay much attention. Now that she thinks about it, maybe the boy had already come back to life by then. But, knowing this still doesn't help solve the problem of the living dead. For this reason, Finola, despite the danger, took the initiative to touch a piece of the debris. The next second, she fell into an illusion and saw her deceased mother. Only then did Finola suddenly realize, it turns out that the debris can awaken the person most missed in the toucher's heart. After the mother touched the debris materialized the figure of the boy, but because the boy needed energy to survive, so, after absorbing the mother's energy, he began to constantly look for other people. After analysis by the two of them, since the boy was created from memories, he must keep repeating the process of his death. We just need to search near the car accident site, and we will definitely find him. Sure enough, the boy appeared again on that road, and there was already a new victim in the car. In a convenience store, Brian stopped the woman and told her that the child in the car wasn't hers, but the bewitched woman didn't believe it and insisted on leaving no matter what. At this moment, Finola was outside, having made contact with the boy and asking what he really was. The next second, Finola found herself suddenly feeling sad, and her body also began to be uncontrollable, slowly grabbing the boy's hand. At the same time, the woman in the room also bled from the corner of her eye, and fell to the ground, falling into a feigned death. When Brian rushed out of the house, Finola and the boy were already gone. Seeing that Finola was also in danger, Brian hurriedly found the boy's sister. Because all of this was illusions created by his mother. If the sister could awaken her mother, the boy might disappear. After hearing this, the sister went to her mother, and began to express her concern for her, hoping that her mother would cheer up, and not stay immersed in the grief of losing her son. Soon the sister's words worked. Tears began to flow from the corners of the still conscious mother's eyes. The next moment, the unconscious mother finally opened her eyes, and as the mother woke up, the other victims also woke up at the same time. Finola, who had been bewitched, also woke up by the roadside, and the boy had already disappeared. A crisis was resolved in this way. However, even more bizarre things followed one after another. An earthquake turned the entire town into an empty ghost town. However, the bizarre things didn't end. A large number of metal objects, as if summoned by a mysterious force, moved towards the streets, piling up outside the town into a steel Great Wall. Soon this news reached the federal organization. Finola and Brian, as investigators, went to the destination again to investigate. When the two arrived, the steel wall was already quite large in scale, stretching for dozens of kilometers and surrounding the town. After detection with instruments, it was found that the radiation level in the entire town seriously exceeded the standard. It seems there must be alien debris involved. Brian and the other hurriedly entered to investigate, and in the town, there was still a steady stream of metal substances moving towards the wall. Brian had thought this was a magnetization phenomenon, but after instrument detection, it was found that these things were not attracted by magnetic force. Just as he was puzzled, suddenly, he saw a figure in the rearview mirror. This greatly shocked Brian, who raised his gun and told the other person to come out. The man, named Eric, claimed to be a resident of this city. However, when asked why he was here, Eric seemed to have lost most of his memories. He didn't know why he was here, only that he was looking for something. Seeing that the other person was in an extremely unstable mood, Brian could only tell his colleague to take the man away. Suddenly, something strange happened. The man who had just been taken away suddenly escaped, and tried to seize a nearby car. Brian hurried forward and restrained him. At this moment, the man appeared extremely violent, with quite a lot of blood on his body. This moment made Finola's heart rise to her throat. It seemed that their colleague had been killed. However, the man still insisted that he knew nothing, as if he had forgotten what had just happened. While the three were arguing, a nearby yacht suddenly moved, attracting the attention of the two. The man took the opportunity to escape and slipped into a nearby factory. The two took out their weapons and sneaked into the factory after him. Fortunately, after a chase, Brian caught the man on the street. However, in just a few minutes, the man seemed to have changed his clothes, and the blood on his body had been cleaned off. Just as Brian was about to inform Finola in the factory also made a discovery. Following the sound, Finola also found the hiding man beside the shelf. This greatly shocked Finola. When the two returned to the base, they found that they had already caught 3 identical Erics. Moreover, after investigation, these people had different personalities. The first man was meticulous and solely focused on his career. The second man was full of pessimistic thoughts, just as Brian and the other were preparing to conduct an in-depth investigation. The 3 men began to have difficulty breathing. No matter how they tried to rescue them, it was to no avail. In the end, they could only watch the men die. Finola speculated that the man had most likely come into contact with the debris, which had thus copied his body. So the 2 decided to go to Eric's home to investigate. Sure enough, as soon as they arrived at the door, the instrument showed abnormal radiation. The 2 hurriedly put on protective suits and entered to investigate. At this time, the house was in a mess, with a huge pit smashed in the roof and basement. It seemed that Eric was the lucky one whose house had been hit by the debris. The 2 hurriedly split up to investigate. Brian went to the basement and found the alien debris there, while Brian, who had come upstairs from below, was entering a room. He saw a figure. It was himself. This moment made Brian's mind blow up on the spot. After a short standoff, he finally chose to shoot. It seemed that even with protective suits on, the debris could still replicate. Brian informed the containment team to strengthen protection. Soon the team arrived to carry out frequency reduction processing on the debris. However, while they were adjusting the equipment, there was a noise in the house, and another Eric was created. Before everyone could feel surprised, constant noises began to come from the room, and countless Erics were replicated, and due to excessive replication, the man's body had mutated and no longer looked human. To stop the cloning from continuing, they had to find the original body. According to the investigation of the clones, since their appearance, they had always moved towards the outer steel wall, obviously attracted by something. It was very likely that the original body was inside that circle of walls. The 2 quickly found his location by locating the man's vehicle. But just as Brian was rescuing the unconscious man, the debris suddenly emitted a huge energy wave. The electromagnetic pulse spread to the wall at an extremely fast speed. Everywhere it passed, all metal objects were severely crushed. Seeing that the man was still trapped in the car, almost crushed into a meat pie, at this critical moment, the containment team finally reduced the frequency of the debris, thus stopping the release of pulse energy. The crisis in the town was also resolved, but the next day, a new supernatural event occurred again. A 2-dimensional plane suddenly appeared on the farm, and devoured countless humans. The first to discover it was a woman working on the farm. That mirror just appeared out of thin air, yet the mirror had no thickness. It seemed as if there was something existing inside it. The woman cautiously stepped forward to check and even threw a stone over. However, the stone didn't pass through the mirror surface, but disappeared directly on the spot. At this moment, the mirror seemed to be disturbed. A palm suddenly slapped on the mirror surface. Immediately after, countless figures appeared inside. The federal organization that received the news rushed over quickly. However, the open space at this time had returned to normal. Brian and the other could only watch the video. From the video, Finola found that the people inside were likely trying to get out, but now the plane has disappeared. Everyone could only wait for the result temporarily. Just in the evening, after processing the sound at the scene, Finola actually heard a human voice. The figure in the mirror actually opened its mouth to greet. The voice stated that he saw the lights of the camp. Obviously, the mirror surface had always been there, but they couldn't see it. At this moment, the mirror surface appeared again. By processing the wireless frequency band, Finola established communication with the person inside. The person inside called himself Hagman and was a student from 2019. He was trapped here for some unknown reason, but when Finola asked if he could see the people around, he told everyone that there was no one near him. This surprised everyone greatly, because from their perspective, there were several figures in the mirror. Obviously, the communication wasn't directed at everyone inside. Just as everyone was struggling with how to rescue them, the electromagnetic field suddenly began to fluctuate. The mirror surface disappeared again. Fortunately, they had already obtained information about the woman. After analysis by the technical team, they found that when Hagman was emotionally agitated, the planar electromagnetic field would fluctuate and appear. In order to contact Hagman again, the federal organization brought in his father. When the father learned that his missing daughter was still alive, he appeared very excited. Finola told the girl's father that his daughter had probably strayed into a two-dimensional space. Moreover, the appearance of the space was likely related to Hagman's emotions. To keep the space sustained, he had to keep his daughter in high spirits. After processing the frequency, the father began to talk to his daughter, and after seeing her father, Hagman appeared excited, hoping that her father could save her. She also said that she had been trapped inside for several hours. This surprised everyone greatly, because the several hours she mentioned had actually been 20 years in reality. Obviously, after traveling through different dimensions, the passage of time also differs. However, what's strange is that they could still communicate synchronously with each other. This indicates that there is a force nearby affecting the flow rate of time. Everyone immediately conducted a carpet search around the area. In the woods on the nearby back mountain, they found alien debris, and there was a car parked nearby. Obviously someone had already been there first, but why is the debris still here? Just in case, Brian began to check around. but he didn't find other suspicious figures. After investigation by researchers, it was found that the debris is most likely the navigation module of the spaceship. It can be used to perform dimensional jumps in space. The current debris is still in operation, thus causing them to be able to communicate with people in the two-dimensional plane. Later, everyone found another fragment not far away, but this fragment had no energy left. Everyone brought the debris back, and after energizing it with electromagnetic energy, the two-dimensional plane appeared again, and with the adjustment of the debris' frequency band, this time the plane had turned into a three-dimensional image. Everyone could finally see the figure of Hagman trapped inside, but the girl still couldn't get out of it. What's worse, this three-dimensional construction can't last for too long. Now the fragment has little energy left and can't be energized a second time. If we don't carry out the rescue now, the girl will likely be trapped and die inside. After some thinking, Finola thought that since the fragment can create a two-dimensional plane, it must naturally be a function of the alien spaceship. We can try putting one of them inside, and maybe it can open a dimensional gap. There's no time to lose. Everyone put the energy-depleted debris inside, and as the debris entered, the two-dimensional space indeed began to crack. Hagman stretched her hand out. Finola grabbed her and pulled the girl out from inside. The crisis was resolved. Finola and the other contained another piece of debris. However, they didn't know that another mysterious organization was also secretly collecting these debris, and no one knew what their purpose really was. There are still many alien debris scattered around the world, and shortly after the spaceship crashed, a piece of debris also fell into a peaceful town. At this time, the man didn't realize that danger had already arrived. He only noticed that the flame in the boiler suddenly went out. As he was about to go forward to check, he felt unwell and began to cough, as if he was about to lose his breath. When he arrived at the window to get some fresh air, he realized that the sky outside was pitch black. A gray rainstorm swept across the entire town. However, this rain seemed to be mixed with something strange. In just a few minutes, tens of thousands of acres of corn all became diseased and withered. That's not all. On the dead corn stalks, a strange parasitic flower grew. The corn in the fields was his lifelong income. Seeing that it was about to die out completely, he hurried to the cornfield to check, and as the man went further in, he found something even more bizarre happening. On the town road just a step away, it was still sunny. That strange gray rain seemed to only fall in the town. Before he could figure out the situation, a strong sense of suffocation swept over him again. In just a few seconds, the man collapsed due to lack of oxygen, then his body began to fester and he died. Such a big incident alarmed the higher-ups. Soon Brian and Finola, who specialize in handling supernatural events, rushed to the scene. The two saw from a distance the dark cloud covering the entire town. They didn't dare to enter rashly and could only investigate from the periphery. After analysis by technical personnel, it was found that the oxygen in the town had decreased to varying degrees, as if an environmental transformation had taken place. But what's strange is that this transformation seems to only affect the town, and the outside world has not been disturbed. Later, Brian and Finola put on their protective suits and entered to investigate. The two went all the way to the withered cornfield. After detection with instruments, it was found that the chlorine in the town seriously exceeded the standard. This is no longer suitable for human survival. At the same time, Finola also found some strange flowers parasitizing on those withered cornstalks. She carefully picked them off, preparing to take them back for testing. After staying for a while, the two continued their in-depth investigation. They entered the town's greenhouse and found that the plants here, protected by the greenhouse, were not damaged. Obviously, the strange heavy rain contained some substance that changed the molecular structure of the plants. Later, the two found the sheltering residents in the greenhouse. When the town residents saw the two appear, they seemed to have found a lifeline, wanting the two to take them away. But since the specific situation isn't yet clear, and worried that the residents might also be infected, Brian could only let these people stay where they were temporarily. They went back first to assess the environment. Finola, who returned to the laboratory, made a new discovery from the flowers she brought back. This is obviously not an earth plant. This alien plant has its own photosynthetic system. It continuously absorbs surrounding oxygen, and in turn releases chlorine gas. So this is the reason why the chlorine in the town exceeds the standard. Obviously, there should also be a piece of alien debris near the town. After searching the town, Brian found a piece of debris. That is likely the biological system of the alien spaceship directly below the densest part of the cloud layer. The surrounding radiation levels seriously exceed the standard, indicating that this piece of debris is still functioning. However, now that it's found, only frequency reduction processing is needed to make the town return to normal. However, things are not that simple. After staff collected blood samples from the town residents, it was found that the survivors' bodies had changed. Under the influence of the gray rain, the red blood cells have mutated and have become only suitable for transporting chlorine gas, and this also explains why the dead man had symptoms of suffocation, because oxygen has become a deadly poison for them. But before Finola could come up with a solution, Brian and the town sent another bad news. At this time, the cloud layer began to thicken, showing a tendency to expand outward. If the alien debris isn't shut down quickly, the area being transformed will likely become larger and larger, but Finola knew that once they rashly shut down the device, the residents here would also die from inhaling oxygen. But she had no intention of giving up on the town's residents. After thinking, Finola finally came up with a temporary solution. She planned to use the contained number 489 alien debris. This type of debris has the ability to freeze living organisms, which can temporarily seal the survivors, and unseal them later when a solution is found. Soon, the number 489 debris was delivered to the town. After activating it with electromagnetic energy, the debris activated its ability, and an energy shield enveloped all town members. Everyone instantly turned into a bunch of statues, but vital sign monitors showed they were still alive. After sealing the town's residents, organization members began frequency reduction processing on the debris. As the frequency decreased, the dark clouds in the sky dissipated and sunlight shone through again. The environment returned to normal, and those sealed town residents can only wait for future technological advancements to be unsealed and rescued. The incident was resolved, but Brian and Finola once again embarked on a new investigation. Far away in a forest on the other side of the town, in an abandoned wooden house, a strange corpse was found. Researchers stated that as long as you place a phone on it, it can automatically charge. Obviously, the area around the corpse is filled with a large number of ions. After examining the mummy, although the mummies seem to be thousands of years old, in fact, they only died a day ago, it was as if overnight, their vital signs were absorbed by something, to cause so many strange phenomena. The two knew without thinking that it could only be alien debris. After investigating the identity of the corpse, those who died here were all elderly people, with an average age of 90, but this puzzled Brian. How did these elderly people, who even need tools to walk, manage to climb mountains and cross ridges to reach this wild place? Since there were no surveillance cameras around, everyone hit a bottleneck in the investigation. However, fortunately, through investigating recent cases of missing elderly people, Brian and the other identified an elderly person who had just gone missing. Recently, the two launched an investigation. Through the surveillance provided by the police, they found that the elderly person had contact with two young couples before going missing. But from the surveillance footage, the elderly person voluntarily followed them when going up the mountain. Following the surveillance all the way, the two found the suspect vehicle in a forest. After inspecting the car, they found that the items inside the car had extremely high radiation levels. In the trunk, they also found the missing elderly person's clothes. Obviously, the alien debris was in the hands of that young couple. To arrest the suspects, Brian and the others decided to stand guard not far away. After all, they would have to come back. Meanwhile, the missing elderly person was walking in the forest with a group of young people. During their conversation, the elderly person seemed like old friends with them for years. Later, after confirming no one was following them, a boy took a fragment out of his backpack and handed it to the elderly person, and warned him that no matter what happens later, he must not let go. The elderly person took the debris and was about to say something, when a magical scene happened. The debris began to glow. As a red light flickered, the elderly person's face became younger at a visible speed. In just a few minutes, the white-haired old man turned into a young man. Such an incredible thing made the elderly person somewhat incredulous. Before he could feel happy, the boy next to him repeatedly warned him that he must not leave the debris in the future, because once he is more than 500 meters away from it, he will age again, even faster than before. After doing all this, several people got ready to go down the mountain and drive away from here. This was just caught by Brian. Having been waiting for a long time, he pounced and pinned one down, while the other companions, upon seeing the suddenly appearing people, panicked and started to flee. Unfortunately, in the moment of panic, those young people all forgot the previous instructions, because one of the companions was too far from the debris. In an instant, the other's life began to fade away continuously. In just a few seconds, he turned into a mummy. The couple in the distance also panicked in their hearts. After hearing their companions cry for help, the girls suddenly stopped, though, because the debris was in their hands. If they ran too far, the others would definitely die. The two could only stay nearby. But this wasn't a solution either. Finally, the boy had to contact Brian, hoping that he would let them go. After all, they hadn't committed any crime. On the contrary, they had even helped those dying elderly people gain a new lease on life, hoping that Brian wouldn't stop them. If this stalemate continued, once the debris left them, they would all be doomed. On the other side, through the autopsy of the deceased elderly, researchers found that the debris was likely the medical system on the spaceship. It can change human DNA, thus reversing aging. After discussions among everyone, if we can lock in this genetic level change, it might allow these elderly people to recover. Although they will continue to age, at least they won't die directly like now. Finola also found out the identities of the young couple. Unexpectedly, they had once been an elderly couple, The two obtained the debris by chance. After discovering the debris' magical ability, they had the idea of helping other elderly people, although both of them had good intentions. But after all, this incident had already resulted in deaths. Brian kindly persuaded them to let it go. Human aging, illness, and death are natural laws that can't be avoided. What they were doing was just putting shackles on themselves. Moreover, they themselves are still researching these alien debris. If an accident occurs, it may cause more serious consequences. Seeing that things had come to this point, the man's wife finally came to terms with it and persuaded her husband not to resist. After all, they had spent their whole lives together. This was enough for him. Under his wife's persuasion, the man finally handed over the debris. Then he took his wife's hand and walked into the depths of the forest. Several months later, at a port far away on the coast, a man was bored waiting for a ship and playing with his phone. The originally bustling dock suddenly became quiet. The passers-by around seemed to have time frozen, turning into eerie statues one by one. Immediately after, the man found that his body also began to be uncontrollable. At this moment, the woman who had been stationary nearby suddenly came to his side, and the man, like a puppet, picked up the bag on the ground and handed it to the unfamiliar woman. After taking the backpack, the woman turned and left with a blank expression. At this moment, the man took out the pistol from his pocket and pointed it at his own head. Soon, Finola and Brian, who took over the case, rushed over to investigate. They watched the dock's surveillance. It could be seen in the video that the man wasn't threatened. Everything seemed voluntary. However, from the man's trembling and stiff limbs, Finola still guessed that he was probably under some kind of control, and the woman in the surveillance was also found, but investigations revealed that she had no connection with the victim, and after finding her, the woman knew nothing about what had happened before. It was obviously another supernatural case. To investigate what was hidden in the missing package, Brian and the others started searching from around the man. As soon as they arrived at the man's home, the man's younger brother Luke appeared very impatient. He said that if they wanted the alien debris, they should go to his elder brother. It turned out that Luke had mistaken Brian and the other for buyers. Not long ago, an alien debris crashed in the backyard of his house. It was Luke's elder brother who discovered the debris, eager to get rich quick. His elder brother contacted a mysterious organization, planning to sell the debris. That's why he went to the dock for the transaction. Finola and the other informed Luke of the news that his elder brother had died. This left Luke a bit at a loss, for his elder brother had a daughter. He didn't know how to tell his niece. Seeing that no more clues could be found, Finola decided to check their backyard. However, the scene suddenly shifted, and the two found themselves in the car. Finola was holding a computer, investigating something, having forgotten what had just happened. Finally, Finola sensed something was wrong, remembering that they were clearly supposed to go to the backyard swamp, but couldn't remember why they had come back. She hurriedly turned around and rushed back, arrived at the swamp and found that the radiation here was very high. Obviously, the crash debris hadn't been taken away. The two were about to go further in, but the closer they got to the swamp, the faster Finola's heart beat. Clearly, they hadn't found anything, but they just felt fear, as if something was manipulating his emotions. The two had to return to the car again. Later, Brian made some progress. The deceased had an ex-wife who seemed to know something, so the two rushed over immediately. From the woman, they learned that the main reason for their separation was their daughter. The woman felt that her daughter was a bit abnormal, and could affect the emotions of people around her. Having learned this, the two went to Luke's house again to investigate. At the same time, the girl had already arrived at the swamp's pond. She sat upright in the water, meditating. Soon, some fragments in the swamp gathered towards her. After collecting a bag of debris, the girl hurried back. Just then, Finola and Brian also rushed back. Finola found the girl, tested her with instruments, and found that the girl had excessive radiation levels on her body. Obviously, the girl had been affected by the debris. The girl told Finola that she collected these things because her uncle needed them. On the other side, Brian accidentally saw a backpack in the room, which was exactly the missing package from the dock. It seemed that all this was Luke's doing. However, Luke didn't give Brian a chance to persuade him to surrender. He used the Fragments' ability to control the two's consciousness, making them go back on their own. In this way, Brian and Finola drove away from here. When they returned to the airport to catch a plane, Finola suddenly came to her senses. But by this time, Luke had already arrived at the airport. It turned out that he didn't intend to let Finola go. After all, the two were members of the federal organization, and if they died in his home, there would be trouble. So he manipulated the two to leave, planning to tamper with the plane, and make it look like an accident. It's a pity that Finola, who woke up early, exposed Luke's plan and surrounded him at the airport. However, they still underestimated the power of the fragment. The soldier nearby hadn't finished speaking when he killed his comrade. Fortunately, Brian arrived in time and took down the soldier. However, he was no match for Luke. With just one look, Brian couldn't help but point the gun at his own head. Just as Brian was about to die, Luke beside him suddenly bent over as if being controlled. It turned out to be Luke's niece. She had stronger adaptability, and had to act because she didn't want her uncle to hurt more innocent people. In the end, Brian narrowly escaped death, and the debris was contained. It's just that another mysterious organization that is also collecting fragments has gradually emerged. In order to explore the mysterious power of alien debris, these organizations capture living people for experiments. Therefore, a special factory was built to dispose of the dead experimental subjects. On this day, there was a sudden movement in the body bag, and a woman miraculously came back to life. The woman miraculously passed through a man's body. While escaping, the federal organization had long noticed this mysterious organization, which calls itself Undertow, and specializes in collecting alien debris for experiments, and Finola's father is also in the hands of this organization, because her father, Dr. N, is a top physicist, and one of the first to discover alien debris, so the Undertow organization kidnapped Dr. N, and made him oversee the experimental process, and the federal organization's mission this time is to rescue Dr. And, however, there was a split within the Federal Bureau at this time. Before departure, the superior found Brian, and hoped that he would eliminate Finola's father after finding him. After all, this person is too much of a threat. If someone with ulterior motives finds him again, it is likely that even bigger problems will arise. Unexpectedly, due to spending day and night with Finola, the two had long developed feelings for each other. Before setting off, Brian told Finola everything, planning to figure out a way after rescuing Finola's father. On their way to the Undertow base, the two happened to run straight into the escaping woman, but when they got out of the car to check, they found nothing, as if everything just now was an illusion. However, Brian sensed something was wrong. The puddle nearby was abnormal. Clearly, there was no wind around, yet the water surface kept rippling as if disturbed by something. Brian picked up a handful of dirt from the ground and threw it towards the open space in front of him. The next second, a figure emerged in the open space. It turned out that the woman could not only walk through walls, but also had the ability to turn invisible. Seeing that everyone had discovered her presence, the woman, having been tortured for years, was extremely frightened and squatted on the ground with her head in her hands. Brian kept comforting the girl, while Finola could tell from the girl's neck that she had a debris fragment implanted. The two took the girl back to the car, and sent someone to take her back to the city, while they confirmed the general direction of the Undertow base under the girl's guidance. As they went further in, the closer they got to the base, the higher the radiation levels around them became. Finally, the team found the base's iron gate on a hillside. After entering the base's interior, Finola discovered a large number of test subjects inside. After rescuing these test subjects, their actions were finally exposed. The alarm sounded, the base's armed personnel swarmed in, and a fierce battle broke out between the two sides. The group had to fight while searching for Finola's father. Finally, in a room, everyone found Dr. N huddled on the ground, but before the father and daughter could reunite, from the moment he saw Dr. N, the team leader's expression became unnatural. It turned out that the team members had also received an order to secretly execute Dr. N. Noticing something was wrong, Brian signaled everyone not to get excited, saying they'd talk about it after escaping. Before the team leader could react, Brian took him down. It seemed that Brian was even willing to betray the organization for Finola. The three finally escaped from the base. Back at the hotel, Dr. N revealed all of the Undertow organization's plans. It turned out that they had been searching for the ultimate debris of the alien spaceship, which possessed the power to change everything, but because the energy emitted by that debris couldn't be tracked through simple radiation, the Undertow organization had kidnapped Dr. N to have him develop a tracking device. The device was currently in its final stage. As long as he was given a bit more time, he would definitely find that debris. Fortunately, Finola and the others had rescued him, so next, they just needed to wait for him to finish assembling the device, and Finola could use it to find the last fragment. But was that really the case? Dr. N, while sleeping at night, strangely wrapped himself in tinfoil. Obviously, he had secrets hidden from the two. Not long after the two rescued Dr. N, they suddenly received a mysterious invitation. The two took the initiative to come, but it was a young man who opened the door. The man took the initiative to say their names, led them into the house, and then began to tell the story of what had happened. It turned out that the man and his sister discovered a huge piece of debris while diving, and that debris could travel through time and space. Out of curiosity, the two began to use the debris to travel together. But during one adventure, the man's sister disappeared, but an unfamiliar younger brother appeared in the family, so he approached Brian and the other hoping they could help him find his sister. After hearing this, Brian only felt disbelief, thinking that the man was hallucinating because of the debris, but then the man told what happened afterward, which shocked both of them greatly. Finola hurriedly contacted her father, hoping to get help from him. Upon learning that the other party had traveled through time and space, Dr. N warned him not to travel again, because this would cause the collapse of parallel universes. But at this point, the man couldn't listen. He only wanted to find his sister, so he sneaked away and jumped into the sea again to travel through time and space. It was too late when the two noticed. Time returned to the road where the two were coming again, but the difference was that the partner beside Brian had changed, but the situation remained the same. So the man jumped into the sea again, and as the man traveled again and again, the partner beside Brian also changed again and again. Finally, after dozens of times, Brian and Finola appeared, but the man still hadn't found his sister. Seeing that he was about to be regarded as a lunatic by Brian, he prepared to travel again, but this time, there was finally a difference. Brian noticed the situation in time and also jumped into the sea with him. The two finally traveled during the fight. This time, Brian didn't indulge him, having the previous memories. Brian cuffed the man, however, because the man kept traveling, time and space had begun to collapse, and various cracks appeared in the room. Seeing this situation, Brian's partner wanted to send someone to take the debris, but how could Brian agree? After all, he wasn't from this time and space and had to go back. He contacted Finola hoping to get help, but Finola in this time and space was just an operator and couldn't help him. Brian had to uncuff the man and traveled with him again. Unfortunately, this time the partner wasn't Finola either. Brian, frustrated, knocked on the door again, and this time it was the man's sister who opened it. By this time and space cracks were everywhere in the room, and things began to cycle again. But this time, it was the sister who jumped into the sea, and as time and space changed, the several people were separated. Fortunately, Finola learned from the sister that her counterpart in another time and space had once received help from her father, Dr. N. But at that time, only a two-way deviation was known, and no one knew its specific meaning. To reset the disordered time and space, Finola in this time and space asked her living father, and finally learned that to reset time and space, they must travel at the same time. But now everyone is in different time and spaces and can't communicate. Fortunately, in the space-time cracks, they can see what each other has experienced, so they wrote messages on paper to inform Brian's in other time and spaces to travel uniformly in 4 minutes. Brian's who received the message immediately took action, and the 4 people successfully traveled before the space-time cracks could swallow the room. Finally, time and space were reset. After solving the problem here, the debris was also recovered. However, Brian and the other didn't stop, and new supernatural phenomena appeared again, only this time, the phenomenon didn't emanate from debris but from a woman. When the containment team stepped forward to ask, the other party eerily said Brian's name. This greatly surprised Brian, but due to fear of danger, they could only transfer the woman back to the base. Only after the electromagnetic frequency was reduced did they dare to step forward to observe. However, after frequency reduction processing, the other party didn't return to normal and kept repeating Brian's past. Brian, confused, intended to step forward to ask but was pulled into an illusion by the woman. That was a memory of Brian's time on the battlefield. In reality, Brian fainted instantly after making contact with her. Everyone hurriedly took him for treatment. Meanwhile, Brian in the illusion was repeating a past mission, a nightmare he never wanted to recall in his life. Because of this, his beloved woman died on the battlefield. As Brian was burying the girl, the woman appeared again, sitting quietly on a chair. Obviously, she wanted to tell him something. Brian angrily questioned her, but just as he was about to get the answer, Finola outside was already extremely anxious. Seeing Brian's vital signs getting weaker and weaker, emergency treatment was necessary. Finally, they woke Brian up with electric shock. Woken up, Brian hurried to ask the woman, but unfortunately, after Brian woke up, the woman seemed to lose all vitality and stopped moving. However, things were far from over. After Brian and the other returned to the base, the debris fragments previously contained began to behave abnormally. As if uncontrolled, they began to flee. Brian and the others soon learned of the situation, and entered with the investigation team to check. As soon as he entered the interior, he saw many technicians standing in the corner as if in a trance. No matter how they shouted, it was useless. Obviously, they were controlled by something. The two had no clues and could only continue their in-depth investigation. But there was no change in the warehouse. Just as the two were at a loss, the controlled technicians suddenly started moving. They placed the contained debris together, and immediately after, those boxes flew into the air and then disappeared. The next second when they reappeared, only an empty box was left. Obviously, there was a piece of debris still functioning in the base, so they hurriedly placed a device to recover it. However, when the frequency was turned on, it was found to be useless. The boxes were still disappearing one by one. Finola could only contact her father, Dr. N. By observing the box numbers, Dr. N believed this was related to the slope sequence. This piece of debris was devouring other fragments, and could capture brainwaves, so they must solve it quickly, otherwise, those technicians would all become idiots by then, and the method was to reverse the device to temporarily isolate the debris' ability. Sure enough, with Dr. N's help, those boxes failed to travel again. After temporarily gaining control of the situation, by investigating the frequency, Finola and the other found the missing debris, but when the two entered the first basement floor, they found that it was an abandoned laboratory. From the remaining data, they learned that superpowered weapons were being researched here. It was obvious that an accident during the research caused all these things to happen. Finola found her superior to question, and denounced them for violating the treaty by secretly researching the weaponization of debris. Meanwhile, Brian, who was in the basement, was preparing to recover the debris. However, at this moment, something strange happened. The chair that once appeared in the dream showed up in the corridor, and the woman was standing not far away, seemingly wanting to tell Brian something. At the moment he made contact with the woman, Brian finally understood everything. At the same time, the controlled researchers started moving forward, trying to turn off the frequency reduction device, but the moment they touched it, they turned into smoke, and the scene became chaotic. But Brian found Finola and told her that he had understood everything. All the debris were part of a whole, and they couldn't stop them from disappearing. In the end, Finola followed Brian's words and turned off the device. Then, using a remaining fragment, they released the debris stuck in the ceiling. At the moment the debris disappeared, a ball of light appeared out of nowhere, then left the base under everyone's gaze, and everything in the base finally returned to normal. But a new crisis quietly emerged. Soon, everyone received new news. A group of people, bewitched by an unknown power, were standing in a canyon. When the three arrived, they found that no matter how much they shouted, the people had no reaction. Just as everyone was confused, someone in the group started laughing, and soon more people joined in. But before the three could react, these people turned angry. In just a few minutes, they seemed to have their emotions manipulated, changing more than 10 kinds of expressions. Obviously, there was a powerful piece of debris nearby, so everyone started an in-depth investigation. Sure enough, a huge pit was found ahead, and the debris inside could control human thoughts. But they couldn't take it away rashly now, because the debris had connected with everyone. If they shut it down like this, the people in the valley would likely die. But at this moment, Dr. N suddenly wanted to take the debris away, saying that with a little modification, it could control all human thoughts. This shocked Finola. When did her father become so cold-blooded? She wouldn't let her father do this. However, Dr. N was confident. The next second, many people suddenly appeared beside him. They were from the Undertow organization. What surprised Finola even more was that her father was the leader of the Undertow organization. After controlling Finola, Dr. N ordered his subordinates to shut down the debris. After a blue light emitted from the device, everyone connected to the debris fell to the ground instantly. Then Dr. N took the debris away. But, on their way back, a black shadow suddenly appeared by the roadside. After watching them leave, the black shadow gradually disappeared. It seemed that others were also keeping an eye on them. At the same time, in a distant desert, a man was meditating. The light ball from before flew to his side, and then the man walked into a cave with the light ball. And in the cave, there was a person frozen in ice, who looked exactly like Finola. And what on earth is going on here? Debris was released in 2021. In an era with a flood of sci-fi dramas, the series attempts to blaze a new trail. With its unique concept and gloomy temperament, it doesn't focus on grand interstellar wars or dazzling future technologies, but rather turns its lens to countless debris fragments scattered across the Earth after an alien spaceship crashes, and the unpredictable impact these fragments have on human individuals and society. This series is like a prism, refracting not only supernatural phenomena, but also the emotions, desires, and fears deep in the human heart. The core driving force of debris is extremely alluring. 3 years after an alien spaceship of unknown origin and purpose disintegrates near Earth's orbit, its fragments scatter across the globe. These fragments are not cold metal, but contain incomprehensible laws or energy that can distort physical reality, manipulate consciousness, and even touch the boundary between life and death. Debris is a series with obvious strengths and weaknesses. It has a highly attractive and in-depth core concept. Alien debris is a prism that reflects and distorts human nature, and creates a unique gloomy and eerie atmosphere. Some unit events also show the potential of combining sci-fi spectacles with human emotions. The chemical reactions between the leading actors, and the secrets they each carry add layers to the plot. However, its slow narrative pace, reluctance to advance the core mystery, weak sci-fi logic, and eventual cancellation severely limit its achievements. It fails to successfully balance unit events and main plot progression like Fringe, nor does it create classic characters that can carry the series. For sci-fi fans who pursue fast pace, intense action, and hardcore scientific logic, this show may disappoint and bore you. But for viewers who prefer psychological thriller atmospheres, slow burn narratives, focus on the exploration of human nature, and can accept sci-fi settings that lean more toward the supernatural and unknown laws, rather than hardcore technology, Debris offers a unique and fascinating journey. It is like an experiment on the human soul, under the irradiation of extreme unknown forces. Although the experiment ends abruptly, the dark light shown in the process is still worth some viewers' reflection. It is an imperfect and unfinished hidden gem, and the debris it leaves behind has itself become a fateful metaphor for the series' theme.